Again, good morning, and thank you for being here this morning. And it's great that we gather here as a family to celebrate this Holy Mass, to celebrate the Eucharist together. And again, we welcome any visitors, any guests that might be joining us here this morning. Today, in a special way, it's actually tomorrow, we're celebrating a special birthday. Teresa Ciotti, Teresa's sitting back here. She's all upset now because I know. Teresa's celebrating her 96th birthday tomorrow. What a great accomplishment, Teresa, and we're all going to pray for you as your family. And thank you for your great witness. Thank you for your great example for all of us here at St. Catherine. As we come together as a family today, a grandpap and his grandson were sitting on their porch out on the farm, and they were sitting there talking in a special way, and the young boy was asking his grandpap, how come oftentimes the church seems so empty? How come there seem to be so many empty seats at church? And grandpap started to tell him a story. Laying at the foot of the grandpap and the grandson was their favorite dog, Rover. And grandpap said, there was one day when I was sitting here on the porch with Rover, and a big white rabbit ran past us. And Rover saw the rabbit, and without even thinking, Rover took off barking and running after that rabbit. And Grandpa said he watched as Rover ran across the field and past some other farms, how some of the other dogs started running with Rover. And they were all barking and they were all yelping as they chased along. But Grandpa said one by one he noticed how the other dogs started to go home. They all got tuckered out, they got tired of the run, they got tired of the chase, and one by one the other dogs would come back home to their farms. And the grandpap said, that's exactly what's going on. And his grandson said, I don't understand, Grandpap, I'm still confused. How does your story explain this to me? And the grandpap said, well, you see, the difference between Rover and the other dogs is very simple. The other dogs that dropped out one by one, they never saw the rabbit. They never saw the rabbit. My dear family, as we come here this morning, we get to see our God. Our God is here among us. He's here among us in each other. He's here in the sacred scriptures that we heard proclaimed by Michael and Ken and Jim and Mark and myself. And most importantly, he's here in the Eucharist as he comes before us on this very altar. Our God is here, and we get to see him. The gospel that we just heard, the Gospel of Luke, Jesus is getting ready to leave his disciples, but they don't know the end of the story. We all know the end of the story. We know what's going to happen to Jesus. We know how he's going to give it all. He's giving up everything. And he's going to die on that cross for love of them and for love of all of us. And he's simply asking them, what's distracting you from following me? What's getting in the way from you seeing me? What's happening that you're falling off like those dogs one by one and going your own way? He's asking us the exact same question as well this morning. In a very powerful way, Michael read that beautiful first reading, and it talks about how our minds are occupied with all kinds of things going on, aren't they? Our minds are all going 1,000,000 miles a minute. Right now we're all thinking about different things. Many of you have your black and gold on, so you're probably focused on that, huh? Our minds are going 1,000,000 miles a minute. Maybe it's thinking about what's going on at home or what's not going on at home. Maybe it's a worry at work or at school. or in our community, or in our world, our minds are weighed down with a lot of things, and our God knows that, but he doesn't want us to get distracted. Do you hear the beautiful gospel? He says about anyone coming after me must first hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, and even his own life if he wants to be my disciple. He's challenging us in a very powerful way to look at what's distracting us. The word hate is a bad translation. He doesn't mean to actually hate. Our understanding of hate is different than the word that was used in Jesus' day. He's simply asking us not to let other things take a more important role in our life than our relationship with our God. He's just telling us to put those things in order. So then he gives us two examples. The first one is a tower. He says, which of you wishing to construct a tower does not first sit down and calculate the cost to see if there is enough for its completion? You see, the people in his time, they needed that big tower so they could sit up in it and watch out into the field to make sure all their livestock were well and make sure that their crops were well as well. And they used that tower to look out. It was an important instrument that they had. So he simply says, which of you wishing to construct it? Then he moves on, he says, or what king marching into battle would not first sit down and decide whether with 10,000 troops he could advance against a king with 20,000 troops? Now, do you see the connection between the two? I'll point it out for you, and I ask you just to pray about it all week. He says about the tower or about the king, he says on both of them, does not one first sit down? Does not the king first sit down? You see, it's all about prayer. It's all about reflection. My dear family, as we gather here today, that's what we're doing. We're sitting down for a moment. We're sitting down for an hour and asking our God to help us with all these things that are going on. And he wants us to do that with any important decision that we have to make in life. Anything that we're doing, we need to first sit down and calculate, to reflect, to pray, to invite our God into those areas so that we don't get distracted, so that we can keep running after him until the very end. Until the very end. A woman was telling me a beautiful story. She was traveling on vacation and she ended up in one of those outlet malls, and it was similar to, I guess, the one Tanger outlets down south of here. And the outlet mall was a distraction to the casino that was on the opposite side of the roadway. And she said as she was walking through the outlets, you know how the shops are all in little shops and you walk outside. As she was walking outside a shoe shop, she noticed a little boy out there just shivering and cold. And he was staring at all the different shoes inside the store. The little boy was just staring and so focused on those shoes. And a woman asked him, well, what's going on? Why are you so intrigued by those shoes? And he said, I've been praying to God that I could get a new pair of shoes because these ones are worn out and they're way too small for me. And with that, the woman looked down and she could see that the shoes were old and worn out, and they probably were way too small for this little boy. So with that, she grabbed him by the hand and she took him into the store, and she asked the sales clerk if they could go and get her a dozen pair of socks. So the store clerk came over and brought the socks, and the woman took off the kid's old shoes and socks, and she helped fit on a new pair of socks. And she said to the little boy, how's that feel? And the little boy started getting teary-eyed, and he said, they feel really good. They feel really warm. And And with that, she said, well, what kind of shoes were you needing? And he said, something warm, something durable. So they picked out a nice, warm pair of boots for the little boy. And he tried them on, and she said, how do those feel? And the little boy said, they feel nice and warm. I think I can get a lot of use, a lot of wear out of them. And with that, he started to tear up even more and more. And the lady said, well, listen, I'm going to buy you the socks, and I'm going to buy you the shoes. And the boy started crying and crying. And the lady asked him, what's wrong? And he said, I'm just so happy, and I'm wondering if you're God's wife. She kept her focus, huh? She knew where the priorities were. She saw that white rabbit. She saw our God throughout her whole life, and she was following him throughout that entire chase. My dear family, as we come together here today, we know the end of this story, and we know that our God comes here before us, and we get to receive him in the Eucharist. He comes here because he wants to nourish each and every one of us, to fill us to overflowing with his love, so that you and I can go out into the world and make his love visible everywhere we go. So my dear family, as we come together, keep your eyes on him. Keep chasing after him. And whenever we get distracted, let's ask our God to help us to focus in again. To focus in again and always keep focused on him and chase him to the very end, because that's what being a true disciple is all about.